Krishna, good morning. Saturday means reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, a wonderful meditation that we can actually carry with us all week. And this is an especially relishable part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita that we're reading. The Madhya 8, the talks between the Lord and Ramananda Roy. And Mother Kamalini had given last week, and she left off at verse 56. And I noticed the last two times I haven't been giving class. It's shifted to not reading the Bengali, so we can read more of the CC in English, the translation, and the purport. So I'll just go with that. So I will, going forward, not read the Bengali. So we'll start with text 57. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered Ramananda Roy, recite a verse from the revealed scriptures concerning the ultimate goal of life. Ramananda replied, if one executes the prescribed duties of his social position, he awakens his original Krishna consciousness. Purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Om Jnana-Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. In this connection, Sri Ramanujacharya states in the Vedartha Sangraha that devotional service is naturally very dear to the living entity. Indeed, it is life's goal. This devotional service is supreme knowledge, or Krishna consciousness, and it brings detachment from all material activity. In the transcendental position, a living being can perfectly acknowledge the superiority of serving the Supreme Lord. The devotees attain the Supreme Lord only by devotional service. Having such knowledge, one engages in his occupational duty, and that is called Bhakti Yoga. By performing Bhakti Yoga, one can rise to the platform of pure devotional service. A great saint, the father of Srila Vyasadeva, Parashara Muni, has specifically mentioned that devotional service to the Lord can ultimately be awakened in human society by the discharge of duties in accordance with the Varnashram system. The Supreme Personality of Godhead instituted Varnashram Dharma to give human beings a chance to return home back to Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, who is known in the Bhagavad Gita as Purushottama, the greatest of all personalities, personally came and declared that the institution of Varnashram Dharma was founded by him. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, 13th verse, Chaturvarnya maya shrishtam guna karma vibhagasha dasya kartaram apimam vidya kartaram avyayam. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, texts 45 through 46, the Lord says, Sve sve karma mibrabrata samsiddhim labhatavara svakarma nirata siddhim yata vindati tachurtrinu yata pavritir bhutanam yena sarva idam tatam svakarmana tamabhyarchya siddhim vindati manava. Human society should be divided into 4 divisions: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and everyone should always engage in his occupational duty. The Lord says that those engaged in their occupational duty can attain perfection simply by rendering loving devotional service to the Lord while executing their particular duty. Actually, the modern ideal of classless society can be introduced only by Krishna consciousness. Let men perform their occupational duty and let them give their profits to the service of the Lord. In other words, one can attain the perfection of life by discharging one's occupational duty and employing the results in the service of the Lord. This method is confirmed by great personalities like Bodhayana, Danka, Dramida, Guhadeva, Kapardi, and Baruchi. It is also confirmed by the Vedanta Sutra. So, as the talks between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy begin, this is kind of the first sort of topic they're touching on, which is everyone being in their constitutional positions based on their psychophysical nature and executing duties in the Varnashram Dharma system. And actually, it's implied here by Srila Prabhupada that, and he says it several times, if they're employed in the Varnashram Dharma system, doing their occupational, what they're supposed to do, they're actually dovetailing those actions into devotional service to Krishna. And that's actually something that is directed by the spiritual master. So the spiritual master can understand the proclivities and the propensities and the psychophysical nature of the disciple, and he can direct those personalities into devotional service based on their where they fit in the Varnashram Dharma system. And we see that quite often in ISKCON, in Krishna consciousness. And, sometimes it seems like maybe some members of the Krishna consciousness movement aren't really on board with the first tenet of Krishna consciousness, namely, you're not that body. And then also putting those bodies to work, whatever their best way that they can work in Krishna consciousness, putting those bodies to work and overcoming those sort of upadis. And this is starting to be discussed a little bit, because actually I was thinking about these verses, these upcoming few verses, when we're hearing about the Vedanta Sutra, so like Prabhupada specifically touches on that. But there's a lot of the Vedartha Sangraha, and also really the Vedas, many of the Vedas. And His Holiness Sri Krishna Goswami was talking about the different Vaisheshika and the different divisions of Vedic literatures. So those things are meant to be sort of rule books for humanity, so they can actually start to understand what their constitutional position is, which is ground level devotional service to Krishna, Krishna's servants. We're all Krishna's servants. Then to be able to dovetail whatever they're doing into Krishna's service, that's actually what Prabhupada is kind of pointing at here. And, it's being confirmed by, many personalities, and the foregone conclusion also that we hear from Prabhupada about, which is refreshing, is that Parasara Muni specifically mentions that devotional service to the Lord can ultimately be awakened in human society. So it's there, it's just in a dormant state. And, as we progress in our own Krishna consciousness and we're more secure in how we're discharging our devotional service to Krishna, we can move into the stratosphere of trying to bring others to that point, so they can start to question how they can serve the Lord. And that's the first step, is for the awakened soul to begin thinking, oh, okay, I'm a servant of Krishna. How shall I serve him? What do I do? Because that's probably quite overwhelming for anyone who doesn't have that consciousness of being a servant and of higher power. So text 58, and this goes on. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashram. There is no other way to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must be situated in the institution of the 4 Varnas and ashrams. Purport. This is a quotation from the Vishnu Purana, Canto 3, Text 8, Chapter 8, Text 9. As stated by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, the purport is that one can realize life's perfection simply by satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 13. Ataha pumbir dvija shreshta varna shrama vibhagasha svanustitasha dharmasha samsiddhir haritoshanam. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality of Godhead. Every man should perform his occupational duty in the light of his particular tendency. According to his abilities, one should accept a position in the Varnashram institution. The divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are natural divisions within society. Indeed, everyone has a prescribed duty according to the Varnashram Dharma. Those who properly execute their prescribed duties live peacefully and are not disturbed by material conditions. The spiritual orders, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas, are called ashrams. If one executes his prescribed duty in both the social and spiritual orders, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied. If one neglects his duties, however, he becomes a transgressor and a candidate for a hellish condition. Actually, we see that different people are engaged in different ways. Therefore, there must be divisions according to work. To attain perfection, one must make devotional service the center of life. In this way, one can awaken his natural instincts by work, association, and education. One should accept the Varnashram divisions by qualification, not by birth. Unless this system is introduced, human activities cannot be systematically executed. The Brahmanas are the intellectuals who can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are always engaged in the cultivation of knowledge. It does not matter whether one is born in India or outside India. Those who are naturally very heroic and who tend to rule over others are called Kshatriyas. Those who tend to produce food by agricultural methods, protect cows and other animals, and engage in trade are called Vaishyas, or merchants. Those who are not sufficiently intelligent to be Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, or Vaishyas are required to serve a master and are called Shudras. Thus everyone can engage in the service of the Lord and awaken his natural Krishna consciousness. If a society does not function according to such natural divisions, the social orders become degraded. The conclusion is that the scientific method of Varnashram Dharma should be adopted by society. So Prabhupada, this is obviously the best case scenario in Varnashram Dharma because as we all know, Kalo Shudra Sambhava, we're all born in Kali Yuga as a Shudra. That's our position in this material world. And only really by being awakened to the fact that there's a higher power, that there's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that we must serve that Supreme Personality of Godhead and understand how we can please Him, can we even begin to understand where we fit in this Varnashram Dharma? Because everything is mixed. You know, Kali Yuga is not pure. It's very degraded, and unfortunately, We're all trying to make the best use of a bad bargain. So when we again take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master who's in touch with Krishna as the localized aspect of Krishna, then we can start to associate, and as it's stated here, by awaken a natural instincts by work, association, and education. When one comes to Krishna consciousness originally, and we've all had this experience, I think, and Chris is probably just, still in it, trying to figure out where we fit. We're trying to, we don't want to say no to any kind of service because we're not really sure about what we're supposed to be doing for Krishna yet. And that's actually what's prescribed. That's a level of surrender that we are undertaking so we can start to understand. We can ask the questions to the senior devotees, to spiritual master. We can educate ourselves through reading and hearing Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam classes, or reading those scriptures, and association, because by kind of osmosis, when we associate with senior devotees and we hear different perspectives, and we hear just even about seemingly random, maybe services that go on in the temple, or things that happen, or situations, or other people's positions and how they're dealing with different situations. When we hear about all those things, that's a kind of an education, and that's actually sadhu sangha. That's our association that we need to progress and to also understand what our own, where we're at, our own sort of platform. And as we sort of figure out by our own sort of, how we feel, what our proclivities are, and being a little more authentic with ourselves about where we're at, being more realistic about where we're at, and then we're also being engaged by the spiritual master, it becomes a little clearer. We're able to understand how we can serve Krishna best, and we begin to understand by association and direction from the spiritual master, and actually bringing forth our own, whatever we can do well. I feel like sometimes when children are being raised in just kind of a blanket situation where everybody is equalized and they're not given the time and the space to explore, and those who are apparently trying to help them in education aren't really helping. They're kind of making them conform to some ideal that they're unfortunately being subjected to as part of education or school. Then children who are naturally curious, they're naturally, their proclivities are right out. They're very, they can't hide them. They just move through and they do what they do. And anybody that's astute in observing children in that way can understand a little bit of how they, how they work, how they tick, and can try to dovetail them into those occupations and encourage them and support them in those decisions. But I feel like in today's society, many of those proclivities or those natural tendencies are tamped down. They're not really encouraged, because maybe they don't fit in that construct that whatever school that they're going to, or they don't fit in society, or they don't fit in their, their portion of the sphere that they're in school. So, they're not being seen as compliant, and then they're, they're minimized. They can't really show themselves as who they are. And it takes a lot to unwind that kind of conditioning that's imposed, to get back to a more authentic state, so one can display all of their proclivities and talents and everything to Krishna, to actually engage in devotional service with their whole heart. If there's something, if there's devotional service and it's not really wholehearted, you don't have your intentions in the right place, there's not encouragement to do those things that you really feel like are a contribution and something that the spiritual master has, prescribed or suggested that one do, then it's going to be forced. It's always going to be a drag. It's going to be not so relishable. And, there's quite a possibility that if you're not engaged in those things, if you're not really into Krishna consciousness, it's not really something that you feel really passionate about, in a very not traditional way, but, you're really wanting to do those things that pleases Krishna. And it's actually very satisfying to come to that conclusion that, okay, maybe this isn't something that I imagine doing, or maybe it's not 100% relishable all the time, but actually in this material world, nothing is 100% relishable all the time unless you're serving the Lord, and whatever that looks like. So that's kind of what's being touched on with, I feel like Prabhupada's trying to say those things in a little more crisp way, because the spiritual orders and the occupational divisions, they're overlapping all the time. And since we are in this material world and we were born in a certain condition, and fortunately we were able to maybe gather more information that we might not have, in other ways, we do have an advantage because we can use those things in Krishna service. And it's funny because, like, personally, sometimes something will come up and I'll think, oh, right, I had that job that time and I did this for a couple months, and okay, so this is useful for that, So Krishna makes arrangements too, because Krishna's Chaitya Guru. He's in there, he's guiding us in different ways. Maybe we don't know it, maybe we're not understanding why. I'm sure everybody's had the experience that you have some situation that you have to go through, and you're thinking, how did I ever get myself into this position? But, months later, you think, okay, well, that's why Krishna put me in that position, which is, it's like reciprocal. You feel very, at least I feel very, grateful and warmed in the heart that Krishna actually put me through that ordeal, so I was able to get a better understanding of things. So we just need to do our duty. Ramananda Roy continued, "My dear son of Kunti, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer in sacrifice, whatever you give in charity, and whatever austerities you perform, all the results of such activities should be offered to me, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Purport. The Lord has said that the Varnashram Dharma is not properly executed in this age of Kali. Therefore, he ordered Ramananda Roy to go further into the matter. Ramananda replied with this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, and that's chapter 9, text 27. It's a very famous verse, which instructs that while remaining in the system of Varnashram Dharma, one may offer the results of his activities to Lord Sri Krishna in loving service. Naturally, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asking Ramananda Roy about the execution of devotional service. Ramananda Roy first enunciated the principle of Varnashram Dharma in consideration of materialistic people. However, this conception is not transcendental. As long as one is in the material world, he must follow the principles of Varnashram Dharma, but devotional service is transcendental. The system of Varnashram Dharma refers to the three modes of material nature, but transcendental devotional service is on the absolute platform. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu belongs to the spiritual world, and his methods for propagating the Sankirtan movement are also imported from the spiritual world. Srila Narottama Das Thakur has sung Golokera Premadana Harinama Sankirtana Ratina Janmiloke Nitai. This states that the Sankirtan movement has nothing to do with this material world. It is imported from the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. Narottama Das Thakur laments that mundane people do not take this Sankirtan movement seriously. Considering the position of devotional service and the Sankirtan movement, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu deemed the system of Varnashram Dharma to be material, although it aims at elevation to the spiritual platform. However, the Sankirtan movement can raise one immediately to the spiritual platform. Consequently, it is said that Varnashram Dharma is external, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested Ramananda Roy to proceed deeper into the matter and uncover the spiritual platform. Sometimes materialists consider Lord Vishnu a material conception. Impersonalists think that above Lord Vishnu is the impersonal Brahman. The impersonalists misunderstand the worship of Lord Vishnu. They worship Lord Vishnu to merge into his body, in order that Vishnu Arandana must be understood. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested that Sri Ramananda Roy proceed further and clear up the issue. Ramananda Roy quoted the verse from the Bhagavad Gita stating that results of one's occupational duty may be offered to Lord Vishnu or Krishna. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 8, it is also said, Dharma svanushtita pumsham vishvakshena katashuya natpadayet yadiratim srama eva hi kevalam. If one executes the occupational duties of Varnashram Dharma, but does not cultivate his dormant Krishna consciousness, his activities are futile. His occupation simply becomes unnecessary labor. So there's quite a lot in this purport that Srila Prabhupada wanted to enunciate. And very clearly he states that although Varnashram Dharma seems to be a material concept, and it is because it actually is dealing with sort of mundane matters, the aim of having everyone participate in Varnashram Dharma is to help them understand their constitutional position, which on our own and left to our own devices most likely isn't going to happen in Kali Yuga with our current conditioning and the fact that we're so covered, our consciousness is so covered. That's why generally Prabhupada stressed again and again, chant and be happy. Chant and be happy. Just chant and be happy. Because a lot of times if we start to ourselves speculate and analyze and try to figure it out, we all have a poor fund of knowledge, I mean, we're not able to, I don't want to say we're all demons, but we're still not really to the point of knowing what should be done and what not should be done. We're not really to that point yet, at least speaking for myself. So shifting our consciousness, luckily, to having that ability or resource to shift our consciousness to being Krishna conscious and just merely understanding all of Prabhupada's instructions, which it they're really a condensed and concise unpacking of all of the scriptures. You know, even if we, long before I was, personally speaking, long before I was ever really studying any scriptures, I just was reading about Prabhupada. I was reading about Prabhupada. I was reading, you know, all of the accounts from his servants. I was reading the Prabhupada Lilamrita, which contains so many statements, and hearing lectures by Srila Prabhupada. You know, Sanskrit is foreign. It might as well be Greek to me. And, you know, knowing what Krishna wants is also foreign. But just by hearing and, you know, reading about Prabhupada's, not only what he said, but how he operated, what his actions are, his example, seeing that and understanding that, and he's so personable and approachable, it's not hard to adore Prabhupada. So then you naturally want to know more and more and more and more. I mean, there's unlimited now these days, not really unlimited, but getting close accounts of different individuals, his disciples, who had interactions with him, and you can hear about it even, you know, firsthand accounts. And just hearing about all those things can give us an easy understanding of how a pure devotee should conduct himself, so we can be, you know, so we can actually understand how we ourselves can be Krishna conscious, and everything else will naturally fall into place just by chanting Hare Krishna faithfully and with attention, just by trying our best and showing up. And, you know, when we get the opportunity to read and we get the opportunity to hear from senior devotees, from the spiritual master, and those on that level, we get to hear about Krishna consciousness. You know, us trying to fit ourselves into Varnashram Dharma, trying to, you know, fit a square peg in a round hole, and trying to speculate on what we should be doing, it's a waste of time. It becomes unnecessarily laborious, as Prabhupada said about activities that aren't for Krishna. And as we go out and we try to spread the word, you know, through Sankirtan movement, that's the only way that people are going to wake up, you know, is hearing some chanting, hearing the holy names, and prasadam. You know, the prasadam needs to be there so they can purify themselves and clear out their clouded brains. You know, that's the only way that they're actually going to be able to understand a little bit about what's going on and how they should live their lives. And it's really, we're very fortunate, and it's to our great, I mean, it's such a boon. I was actually thinking about it last night, you know. We're all kind of in this soup, you know, of the material world. It's just like, you know, we're in the soup. It's like a milieu that we can't lift ourselves out of. And somehow or other, some causeless mercy by Srila Prabhupada, I mean, who knows what, some causeless mercy, you know, sometimes he's able to just pick out, you know, I guess the riper individuals, just pick us out of the soup so we're able to have some enlightenment. You know, it's quite astounding, because when we hear about these concepts for Varnashram Dharma, I mean, I didn't know about this 20 years ago. I was just like doing what everybody told me and trying to figure it out, and, you know, whatever I learned in school and friends, and, you know, no one with any knowledge. It's like the blind leading the blind. And what to speak of, you know, back in the times when there were the Vedas and people could read, you know, maybe they weren't at the platform to be able to understand Krishna, but they knew enough that they needed to read and hear from spiritual authorities and read scriptures so they could understand. These days, nobody even knows that. Nobody knows that. So just thinking about how incredibly fortunate we are to have somehow or other gotten a sidelong glance of Srila Prabhupada's mercy, it's really overwhelming sometimes. And honestly, it's my main motivation to keep trying every single day. I know what I'm about. I know I'm very degraded. I have to come back from a really dark place in this lifetime. I was there for 33 years, and I'm hoping that, it'll at least happen by the time I'm 66, because that'll give it equal amount of time to wear off whatever I had put on. I don't know. Maybe it won't be in this lifetime. I don't know, but I'm just going to try my best, and that's what we need to do. As soon as we get in our divisions, we get direction from the spiritual master. We're starting to, understand our constitutional position. By that understanding, we can actually start to make some progress. We can make a little bit of headway. So I'll just read text 61. This is also external, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. Please proceed and speak further on this matter. Ramananda Roy replied, to give up one's occupational duties in the Varnashram system is the essence of perfection. To give up one's occupational duties in the Varnashram system is the essence of perfection. A Brahmana may renounce his family and accept sannyas. Others, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, may also give up their families and take to Krishna consciousness. Such renunciation is called karma tyaga. By such renunciation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied. In contrast, the process of renouncing the results of one's activities by offering these results to Krishna is not considered uncontaminated, because although such a process implies that one recognizes Krishna as the Supreme Person, it still involves one in activities on the material platform. Since such activities are within the material universe, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered them external. To correct this, Ramananda Roy recommended that one take to the renounced order of life in order to transcend material activities. This is supported by the following verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 11, Text 32. I'm just going to read that part. Ramananda Roy continued, occupational duties are described in the religious scriptures. If one analyzes them, he can fully understand their qualities and faults and then give them up completely to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a person is considered a first-class man. So also a side point on this, and we hear in other parts of the Chaitanya Charitamrita and in many of Prabhupada's lectures and other scriptures, they're talking about a Brahmana. He said a Brahmana may renounce his family and accept sannyas. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas may also give up their families and take to Krishna consciousness. By such renunciation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied. Now, elsewhere we also hear that Kshetra sannyas is preferred in Kali Yuga. Kshetra sannyas means you just perform your duties, whether you're a Brahmana or you're working a job, you're doing administrative work or doing management. You stay in those prescribed duties, and if you're doing it correctly, they're prescribed by the spiritual master to serve Krishna anyway, and you just sit tight. That's Kshetra sannyas. You sit tight, you actually preach from that level where you're at, because if you're in your occupational duty, you're in the right position, and you're actually able to execute devotional service, that's a stable situation, and that should be maintained. That's actually mode of goodness. That should be maintained, and that allows one to be stable enough so they can actually do their preaching work within that sphere. And wherever you're at and you're stable and you're able to be consistent with devotional service, you're consistent in sadhana, you're have the ability to start reaching out to others, because if we don't satisfy our own needs first and foremost, there's not really, we can't really go out of that realm to try to bring others in. People can sense that somebody's not really able to, not really satisfied in what they're doing, whatever that is. That's actually something that is evident to others, because if we're not really happy and satisfied in our duties or positions, we're really not going to be able to induce somebody to think that this is the right thing to do and this will satisfy you, because if it's evident that it doesn't, then they'll know. So we have to be completely stable, we have to be honest where we're at, and we have to reach out when we can to others so we can actually effect that change on others. And ideally, down the line, when everything is situated nicely and we can actually, get to a space where we can and want to reach out more, sure, you can go and we can sort of, minimize those activities which are holding us back from that occupation or that duty. And, maybe things will shift, but those things all are set up on a regular basis by Krishna, obviously Krishna's arrangement, and by the spiritual master, because he's the one that knows us best. He knows us better than we know ourselves. Obviously, we have to be willing. So, very wonderful start to the talks between Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy, and gives us the basis for how we can execute our Krishna consciousness the best, which is being in our varna, working in our varna, and being satisfied and stable in our particular ashram. So, is there any feedback or comments? Anything? I'll just stop there because we're going to greet the deities. Just encouraging it and supporting everybody to execute their prescribed occupational duties and render devotional service under their lordship Sri Sri Radha Golokananda, because it is honestly the most satisfying thing that I've found in my 51 years on this planet so far. And also taking direction from the spiritual master is very relishable, because then I don't really have to do much. I just do what I'm told. It's so much easier that way. So all glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Sri Sri Radha Golokananda.
Purusham Kamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Kamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Kamaham Bhajami Enam Kanvandam Maravindadalaya Taksham Varhavatam Samasita Sundarangam Kandar Ako Vikamaniya Vishesha Shobha
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakale Priya Priti Manti Pasyanti Panti Kayanti Chiram Gaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Adi Purusham Namaho Vishnudaya Krishna Pristaya Putale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Saminiti Namine Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Kurmani Pachar, Negi Nivasesha, Shunyavare, Vasyachare, Zacharande. Krishna, Chaitanya, Raghunatha, Sri Advaita, Gajana Siva Sade, Gauranga, Sri Krishna, Gauranga. Sade, go at the Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Bonityananda the Advaita Gajana Shiva Sati go at the Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Gajana Shiva Sadi Gauranga Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hare, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hare, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Ananda Bravo Nichinanda Shway Digadata Zor Vakta Vrindikajaya Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikat Sayam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Vrindavanam Kijaya Maturidam Jagadada Sami Kijaya Yamunamai Kijaya Shivadi Lasidevi Kijaya Samaveda Bhakta Vrindikajaya Go Premananda Hari Hari. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled Vidya Vadu Jivanam Ananda Sarvatma Snapanam Ravijayate Shri Krishna Kirtanam Nam Makari Bahudad Nija Sarva Shaktish Tatrapita Nimata Smaranera Kala Etad Rashid Avakriva Bhagavan Mamapi Gurdai Vami Jishaniha Nani Nadra Trinad Avi Sulichena Tarori Vasihishuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadanam Najanam Sundarim Pavitam Vajagadish Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Spare Vadat Bhakti Ahait Tiditwaye Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patita Mam Dishme Bavamudo Kripaya Tava Pada Pankajas Nita Duli Sadrasam Jaya Yanam Daruda Shutaraya Vadadam Gadgara Vidyagira Pulakari Chitam Bapukada Avagrahane Vapishati Yugaitam Nimishena Chapchusha Pravishaitam Junyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Vinaheme Ashlisha Baparabana Anashtumam Darshanam Marmatam Karotava Yata Tata Bhavatanatu Lapato Matmana Natastu Sevana Praha. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. My Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, to be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I'm your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years of war. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shikshashtika ki jai. He is addressed very nicely, Gopi dress.